With Darklords making my top 10 rogue deck list, it is time to look at my most recent Darklord deck build. Before we get to that, though, let's see what I would define as the standard Darklord deck. The general strategy of this deck is to either OTK the opponent via the use of swarming through Superbia or Morningstar, or lock the opponent down via Vanity's Fiend or Christia. In an attempt to maximize this play strategy, the deck runs a lot of draw cards to quickly cycle through resources using 3 copies of Allure, 2 to 3 copies of Trade-In, and obviously 3 copies of Ixchel, along with lots of Revival. Not surprisingly, I'm not a fan of this build for 2 major reasons. The first reason is simple preference. I don't like cards like Vanity's Fiend or Christia, i.e. cards that basically shut down the ability to play without any real cost or difficulty to get on the field. Once in a while I play them, but most of the time I try to shy away from them, because I feel they're bad for the game in general. Second, I do not think that Darklords function that effectively as an OTK deck that centers around Superbia or Morningstar, and designing it as such produces a lot of inconsistency and significantly increases the probability of bricking for little benefit. The problem I have with Morningstar is its overall effectiveness is entirely dependent on the aggressiveness of the opponent. If the opponent does not swarm the field or has some level of significant defense, then Star is basically worthless, and due to its cannot special summon condition, a general detriment that is frequently dead in hand and not worth the resources to summon. While Superbia is a fine card, its chief problem in my eyes is that it is somewhat worthless unless you have a means to revive it from the graveyard. However, the more Revival you put into the deck, the higher the probability you brick, drawing the Revival without an effective means to put it to use. Overall, in this deck, Superbia is basically just a 2900 beat stick, because it does not have graveyard-based spell trap or cycle effect possessed by the second generation Darklord monsters, and with the level of negation that exists in the meta, if Superbia gets its effect negated, the usefulness of the Revival has been heavily minimized. In a number of situations, I would rather just straight summon the second generation Darklord monster that the Superbia would have initially summoned because of the dangers of that negation. Basically, for my tastes, I don't like sacrificing the level of consistency seen in running the additional trade-ins, dead if you don't have something to discard, and the extra Revival solely to field an extra 2900 attack point monster some of the time. Overall, to increase victory probability, I think Darklords need some more control elements and a general control strategy with fewer draw and revival elements. So, when looking at the Darklord deck I currently run, while no Morningstar is not controversial at all, for Morningstar is definitely a hot, cold monster, some like it, some do not, the immediate questionable element is that I only run 1 copy of Superbia. Again, I like running this deck in a more control fashion, and under that philosophy, multiple copies of Superbia are not wise because it is largely an OTK-only card due to the lacking that second-generation Darklord effect. However, the main problem with this OTK strategy outside of the consistency issue is that Contact summons the Darklord monster in defense position, and Superbia misses timing on its own revival effect when Contact is returned to the deck via a second-generation Darklord, so it cannot be activated during the opponent's turn at appropriate efficiency relative to Superbia. Therefore, if you want to, in a sense, maximize OTK probability, you have to lean on a card like Call of the Haunted instead. Also, Superbia is now more freely dumpable to the graveyard with Ukoback now available, in addition to being searchable by Banishment. Therefore, based on these elements, I feel that dropping Superbia from multiple copies to 1 copy is appropriate. Other changes among the Darklord monsters. I now run 3 copies of Tezcatlipoca, which has become a lot better in a format where ABC is no longer the dominant deck, in order to maintain field presence and also ward off interruption and negation effects. This fact is especially true in a meta where, in general, destruction over banishing, bouncing, and spinning has once again become the norm. Tez is basically a Darklord-specific, no-cost, my body as a shield that also prevents battle destruction as well. Being a Darklord monster, it can also be dumped at cost for various Darklord card effects. Also, I continue to run 3 copies of Amdusc, which, as stated in my first Darklord profile, is far and away the most underrated Darklord monster. It is the only single tribute second-generation Darklord, meaning that it can get on the field much more consistently than the other Darklords, not commonly relying on revival, and its from-hand recycle effect is much better than most people give it credit for, especially now that Darklords can run either Darklord Ukoback or Foolish Burial Goods. Just like the last build, I still run 2 copies of Juragedo for increased damage potential, the life point gain, which is more useful in this deck due to the control strategy over the OTK strategy, and finally to provide tribute fodder for Amdusc. I will admit that Ukoback is a little better for the deck than I first thought. I feel running either Ukoback or Foolish Burial Goods is important for consistency, and Ukoback seems to be a little bit better because of the Darklord name, allowing it to be used as fodder for Rebellion and Enchantment. And its ability to send either monster or spell or trap, in addition to the normal summons not being consistently utilized in this deck, tends to mitigate any real potential speed advantage associated with goods. I like 2 copies for the deck due to the versatility it provides. I still run 1 glow-up bulb to add some nice Synchro options thanks to the lack of normal summoning frequency, however no Gen X ally Birdman due to deck space. Again, due to the control aspects of this deck, I now run 2 copies of Battle Fader, largely because of the hard once per turn limits on both Contact and Banishment, meaning that Darklords can string together some plays over multiple turns, but have some limitations on same turn explosiveness, another reason why the OTK deck has its problems. Finally, there is some debate about what type of tribute engine, in a sense, to run for this deck, so that one does not exclusively rely on revival cards. Both Speedroids and Squires are the 2 most preferred and have their supporters, with Speedroids having advantages in rank 3 access and more first turn explosiveness, and Squires having advantages in expanding board presence when monsters are already in play, especially as fodder for single tribute monsters, and Eidos can be dumped for Allure. However, rather than pick one or the other, as anyone can see looking at the screen, I kick both aside, for a new challenger has appeared. I run 2 copies of a new card from Raging Tempest that I find works very well with this deck, Apprentice Piper. For those unaware of this card, let's read the effect. The first effect is a flip effect. You can special summon 1 monster from your hand. The second effect, if this card is destroyed by battle or card effect and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon 1 monster from your hand. So, in a deck that naturally runs a lot of high-level monsters, especially when that deck leans more towards special summoning, Piper works very well, and that is certainly the case for Darklords. The ability to get easy from-hand summoning of second-generation Darklords definitely increases deck consistency. While some might immediately dismiss this choice, decrying Piper for being too slow, the important element is that second effect. You get a summons from hand when it is destroyed by a card effect or battle. In the current meta, there is very little that removes face-down monsters from the field without destroying, either through card effect or battle. Therefore, Piper will almost always get at least one of its effects off. Now, if you face ABC, side these guys out immediately, but if not, in my experience, Piper has definitely been a solid support choice. Also, a nice side element of Piper is the double summons, for when a face-down Piper is destroyed by battle, you get the summons from it being flipped face up, and then you get a summons from its battle destruction, i.e. you get to summon 2 monsters from the hand if you want. Finally, Piper is a dark monster, so it can be dumped for Allure as well. For the spells, the one glaring difference is no trade-ins, because now I only run 2 level 8 monsters. I still run 3 copies of Allure of Darkness, Banishment, and Contact, along with 1 Raigeki and 1 Monarchs Stormforth. For the traps, I drop Rebellion down from 3 copies to 2 copies due to the reduced level of revival. The first build focused more on dump and revive as a strategy, thus maxing out on Rebellion was suitable. Also, keeping Darklords in hand for Piper summoning is a meaningful factor at dropping Rebellion from 3 to 2. Now I run 1 copy of Torrential Tribute, due to the increased number of copies of Tez, which can protect Darklord monsters from its destruction while still nuking the opponent's monsters. 1 copy of Enchantment remains, for it is a rather effective blowout card for OTK setup. Overall, I think Enchantment is a lot better than most people give it credit for. Finally, there are 2 directions with the 3 remaining spots I feel this deck can go. First, one can run 3 copies of Drowning Mirror Force, because a lot of players do not want to go after Darklord back row, because most of the time it'll either be chainable or quasi-bluff, because if they go to the graveyard, not a big deal. So destroying those cards tend to produce negatives for the opponent. This philosophy, in a way, can mask the drownings. And if you are running drownings and your opponent knows you're running those drownings, they can go after those bluffs or chainables, burning back row, that won't be available then when you need to actually activate a drowning. Also, drowning, as always, is an excellent blowout card for this deck in any form, tends to brick more often than a number of other decks, and protecting your life points is definitely very important to take advantage of the second generation effects. Second, one could run 3 copies of Lost Wind to heavily impact the speed and proficiency of the opponent playmaking and reduce attack enough so that Darklord monsters can destroy 3,000 or more attackers on the opponent's field without relying on Juragedo or other card effects. While both strategies certainly have their strengths and weaknesses, I prefer the latter, running the 3 copies of Lost Wind. For the extra deck, I run 1 Dante Pilgrim of the Burning Abyss, 1 Leo Keeper of the Sacred Tree, 1 Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon, 1 Black Rose Moonlight Dragon, 1 Herald of the Arclight, 1 number 81 Superdreadnought Rail Cannon Super Dora, 1 Superdreadnought Rail Cannon Gustav Max, when it comes out, 1 True King of all Calamities, 1 number 38 Hope Harbinger Dragon Titanic Galaxy, 1 Divine Dragon Knight Felgrand, 1 Red Eyes Flare Metal Dragon, 1 number 11 Big Eye, 1 Beatrice Lady of the Eternal, 1 Castel the Skyblaster Musketeer, and 1 Mequipped Engineer, or 1 Phantom Knight of Breakswords, depending on whether you want to be more offensive or defensive. In the end, the problem I see with the standard build is that, similar to Monarchs, it bricks at a much higher rate than other competitive decks. Therefore, I prefer this type of strategy, for I find it to be much more consistent than both my first deck or the standard OTK/stun build. As alluded to above, while my first build attempted to mitigate this innate consistency problem, with more playtesting and the change in the meta, I found that there was still too much inconsistency in the OTK stun strategy, hence the changes. Also, since the first build, the release of both Apprentice Piper and Ukoback helped the versatility and consistency of this deck. Well, that is my updated Darklord deck. Thank you for your attention and your time. I'm out.